Some horror movies are polished masterpieces. Others are like the special effects, sets, and acting are being held together by duct tape. And I happen to love both. Flop lovers unite because in this video, I'll be talking about my favorite B-movie horror comedy gems. Movies that are cheap, cheesy, and occasionally insane. Before I get into my list, I do want to give a little love to B-horror as a whole. Originally, during the golden age of Hollywood, this term specifically referred to movies meant to be shown as the lesser-known second half of a double feature. It was the cheaper, faster, less prestigious movie studios pushed out to fill space. But now when people call something a B-movie, they're usually talking less about where it was programmed and more about the vibe. A modern B-movie usually has some combination of a low or mid-level budget, a ridiculous premise, visible rough edges, and a willingness to go bigger, weirder, or dumber than a more polished movie would. It might have bad CGI or awkward line delivery, cheap sets, or practical effects that are clearly doing the best they can. And that's why both horror and comedy fit the B-movie label so naturally. Even if the effects are cheap and the acting is a little rough, if the premise is insane, the creature is memorable, or the jokes actually land, people are still going to have fun. A B-horror comedy doesn't need to be polished, it just needs to lean all the way into its own nonsense. Now let's get into my top 10 favorite B-movie horror comedies. First up is The Gingerdead Man. This one was originally pitched as a Mad TV sketch before being rejected and then later turned into a feature by notorious low-budget production company Full Moon. Writer William Butler recalls going into a meeting with Full Moon founder Charles Band, who asked him what was the goofiest idea he ever had. After explaining his past idea for a killer gingerbread cookie, Band told him he had 1 month to write a script before they film it. Gingerdead Man follows Sarah, a young woman working at her family's bakery while still haunted by the childhood murder of her father at the hands of a serial killer, played by Gary Busey. When a package arrives containing gingerbread mix blended with the serial killer's ashes, the bakery accidentally bakes him back to life as a foul-mouthed, homicidal gingerbread cookie. And that is really the whole appeal. The Gingerdead Man is basically a tiny, profane slasher in the tradition of Freddy or Chucky. Except he's a cookie. So expect him to spend the movie tossing out dumb one-liners and killing people around the bakery. The franchise keeps going too, with around 5 installments, including sequels like Gingerdead Man 2, Passion of the Crust, which is Full Moon taking a stab at meta horror comedy as they parody themselves and their Puppet Master franchise as we see the antagonist terrorizing a low-budget horror movie set. There's also a nod to Child's Play as he has to do an incantation spell to swap his soul into a human body because his cookie body is growing stale. And there's Gingerdead Man 3, Saturday Night Cleaver, where we get a pretty funny opening Silence of the Lambs parody as FBI agent Clarissa Darling visits the villain at the Scientific Research Institute for the study of homicidal baked goods. After that, he accidentally time travels back to 1970, because why the fuck not? From there, they offer more clever parodies, including Saturday Night Fever and Carrie. The first 3 movies are more true low-budget horror comedies. The series eventually goes fully off the rails, and the Gingerdead Man eventually stops even being a homicidal cookie at all, mutating instead into Gingerweed Man, which is the kind of creative decision only a franchise like this could survive. Anyone interested in watching this gem can find it for free on Tubi, the Roku app, and on YouTube for free. The next one on my list is Zombie Strippers. This one has some pretty popular cast members, as it stars horror legend Robert Englund and Jenna Jameson. There's also a few niche cameos from people such as comedian Joey Medina, UFC fighter Tito Ortiz, and Jennifer Holland, who is probably best known as Hallcourt and Peacemaker. Set in a near-future America, this movie follows a group of exotic dancers working at a club run by Ian Esco, played by Robert Englund, when a government experiment involving a zombie virus goes horribly wrong. After one of the dancers is infected, she returns to the club undead, only to become an even bigger star once her stage performances start drawing crowds. Naturally, the infection spreads, and before long, the club is overrun with flesh-eating exotic dancers, while everyone involved keeps making increasingly terrible business decisions. This movie is entertaining as hell. It's campy, ridiculously over the top, bloody, and sexy. How many zombie movies can be described as sexy? The production doesn't feel super polished, but it also doesn't feel like every actor got paid with a Snickers bar and it was shot on a camcorder. It's a pretty fun movie all the way through because you can tell everyone is having fun. If you like trashy B movies, you'll probably love this one. I mean, we have zombie Jenna Jameson shooting ping pong balls and pool balls out of her vagina. And this is still not even the most ridiculous movie on my list, by the way. You can find Zombie Strippers for free on the Roku app. And if you are subscribed to Prime Video, it's on there too. Next up is Evil Bong. This is another one with some familiar cameos, including another horror legend, Bill Moseley, stoner comedian Tommy Chong, and smaller niche cameos like Brandy from Rock of Love. I subbed to Full Moon's streaming service and binged all of their movies during COVID, and to be honest, I really enjoyed the entire cinematic universe that they've created. It's like if Marvel execs were all on acid and had only a budget of about $50. Evil Bong follows a group of college roommates who come into possession of a strange antique bong, only to discover that it is inhabited by a seductive supernatural force with deadly intentions. What starts as a dumb stoner curiosity turns into a surreal nightmare when anyone who smokes from it is transported into a bizarre fantasy world and put at risk of never making it back out. As the body count rises, the group realizes the bong is not just cursed, but actively hunting them, forcing them to figure out how to stop a killer piece of paraphernalia before they all go up in smoke. This one is a stoner comedy, so expect the humor to be on the sillier side. The evil Bong is named EB, which is just the abbreviation for Evil Bong, and she traps you in Bong World, which seems to just be a strip club full of killer strippers and cameos from other Full Moon movies. And in the sequels, Bong World becomes more of a jungle, still full of naked women though, because this is Full Moon. And speaking of sequels, there are 9 of them, spanning across 16 years, with the most current being released in 2022, including a crossover with the most evil cookie in the world, Gingerdead Man versus Evil Bong. We also meet EB's ex-husband, King Bong. The group end up in sexy hell. EB turns goodish and becomes friends and business partners with a few of the main characters. A lot goes on in this franchise. Obviously, it loses most of its horror elements, I'd say pretty much after the first one. But if you're into stoner comedy and so bad it's entertaining movies, I say spark one up and put this on. You can find Evil Bong for free on Tubi and Plex. Next up is my personal favorite. You would think a movie whose tagline is "Warning, boobs in the first second" wouldn't have much to offer, but boy would you be wrong. And I can admit I watch it pretty much every year. Thankskilling was made on a micro budget of about $3,000 by a group of friends from Ohio. Thankskilling follows a group of college kids on Thanksgiving break who accidentally unleash an ancient, foul-mouthed killer turkey named turkey, a vengeful bird who was cursed by Native Americans after the first Thanksgiving and now returns to kill any colonizers unlucky enough to cross his path. The jokes, gags, and one-liners are all pretty on point. Although I will say this is not a clean movie, so expect toilet humor, dark humor, and a lot of swearing. This movie is a gem for many reasons. Like when Turkey kills one of the character's fathers and puts his face on, and no one notices. Or the fact that extra small gravy-flavored condoms exist in this universe. Or the most popular one-liner from the movie,
"Gobble gobble, motherfucker."
This one is definitely for people who like their B-movies ridiculous, borderline offensive, and very aware of how stupid they are. Thankskilling has gained quite the cult following, even spawning an off-Broadway musical. This movie also boasts the title of being the only movie ever to skip its sequel by releasing Thankskilling 3. And although this one has a slightly higher budget with slightly over $110,000 raised on Kickstarter, it's more of a sci-fi meta-comedy than a low-budget slasher. It ramps up the franchise's chaos, puppetry, and self-awareness as we see Turkey now on the hunt for the last copy of Thankskilling 2. So if you are into bad but entertaining, super micro-budget B-movies, Thankskilling is my #1 recommended must-watch. And unfortunately, this one is not streaming anywhere for free, but you can find it on Screenbox if you have a subscription there. Next one is The Velocipaster. The name of this movie says it all. It is exactly, literally, about a pastor who turned into a dinosaur. The director, Brendan Steer, came up with the idea after his phone autocorrected Velociraptor to Velocipaster. He's also quoted as saying, "The movie is made to be fun, and anybody looking for deeper meaning and the man turns into a dinosaur genre is probably on a fool's errand." And fun this movie is. The Velocipaster follows Doug Jones, a priest who, after a personal tragedy, travels to China and comes into contact with a mysterious artifact that gives him the ability to transform into a velociraptor. He chooses to use these powers to become a bargain bin vigilante. He ends up fighting crime, battling ninjas, and getting pushed into acts of revenge by a sex worker named Carol, who has a weird amount of faith in his dinosaur abilities. While So Bad They're Good movies are usually fun, there's something special about bad movies that lean into being bad. This movie is funny because it fully commits to looking cheap. It has that very specific kind of humor where the bad effects, awkward line delivery, and obvious nonsense are a part of the joke. We're pretty much pulled into the ridiculousness from the beginning when his parents die via a car explosion. This scene is pretty much the type of humor that tells you immediately whether this movie is for you or absolutely not for you. It's ridiculous, but in a very earnest way. Like, everyone involved understood the assignment and decided to make the dumbest possible concept as entertaining as they could, earning it a pretty decent and well-deserved cult following. Can't find the Velocipaster for free or even through any subscriptions. You can rent or buy it on Amazon. I would actually say this one is probably worth the money. Next up is The Greasy Strangler. This one is probably the weirdest movie on my list. This movie technically is not a B-movie, it's more made to the aesthetic of one. This is the kind of movie that makes you wonder whether you're watching a cult comedy masterpiece or some kind of cinematic hate crime against good taste. Honestly, it's probably a fair mix of both. The Greasy Strangler follows Big Ronnie and his son Braden, who spend their days running a disco walking tour and living in a strange and unhealthy father-son codependent relationship. Things get even stranger when they both become obsessed with the same woman, Janet, while a greasy, naked serial killer starts prowling the streets at night, strangling people after covering himself in cooking grease. And yes, the Greasy Strangler is exactly who you think it is. This movie is disgusting, absurd, uncomfortable, surreal, and honestly kind of hypnotic. The humor is extremely deadpan and awkward, so if you hate cringe comedy, odd body horror, greasy naked old people, clean naked old people, or strange dialogue like screaming hootie tootie disco cutie at each other for way too long, this might not be for you. But it has definitely earned cult status for being so unapologetically bizarre. You're either going to instantly reject this one or become obsessed with it. And I completely understand both reactions. This is not the type of movie I would recommend to everybody, but I absolutely think this is worth watching at least once for lovers of bizarre film. At the very least, you will never forget it. The Greasy Strangler is not streaming for free anywhere, but it is streaming on Amazon Prime if you are subscribed there. Next up is Wolfcop. The great thing about these B movies is all the titles pretty much tell you exactly what you're getting into. Wolfcop follows Lou Garou, a lazy, alcoholic, small-town cop who wakes up after a strange ritual and realizes he is slowly transforming into a werewolf. Instead of this becoming some tragic horror story about losing his humanity, Lou mostly just keeps drinking, sleeping around, and half-assing his police work, except now he also has claws, enhanced strength, and a tendency to brutally tear criminals apart. As he starts piecing together what happened to him, he uncovers a larger conspiracy involving reptilian shapeshifters that have been operating in the town for years. Okay, so at some point, it felt like they were trying too hard to fit into the so bad it's good movie category, as opposed to most of the others on this list, which just don't take themselves seriously at all. But despite being a morally gray, alcoholic werewolf cop, the lead character is actually pretty likable, and that's where a lot of the charm comes from, rooting for Wolfcop to win. This movie is, I think, the third highest budget movie on this list, following Zombie Stripper's $1 million budget with a $900,000 budget. And it shows because the cinematography, practical effects, and makeup are all pretty good compared to some on this list. And this one gained a big enough cult following to get a sequel. Another Wolf Cop picks up a few months later, with Lou still trying to function as both the town drunk and its most violently effective cop. Unfortunately for him, there's a new police chief in town who is a lot less charmed by his habit of absolutely mauling suspects whenever he goes wolf mode. Meanwhile, the shapeshifters are still lurking around Woodhaven, the conspiracy is far from over, and Lou also ends up with a new werecat love interest. This is a movie I actually would more universally recommend. It doesn't feel as cheap as some of my other recommendations. As far as production and story, I wouldn't call it gross or weird. I feel like it'll be entertaining to most, if not just maybe a little too silly. Wolf Cop can be streamed for free on Tubi, Pluto, and the Roku app. Next up is Zombeavers. This one is probably my second personal favorite here. It's a classic cabin in the woods style horror, but instead of serial killers or demons or anything else in the woods that can actually be scary, the monsters are zombie beavers. Zombeavers follows a group of college friends heading to a remote riverside cabin for a weekend getaway, only for the trip to be ruined by a pack of radioactive zombie beavers attacking the area. What starts as a pretty standard, horny cabin horror setup escalates into full creature feature chaos once the group realizes these mutant undead beavers are not only killing people, but also infecting them and turning some of the victims into bizarre human beaver hybrids. This movie is way more fun than it has any right to be. The premise is completely ridiculous, and the whole thing has that perfect mix of camp, gore, and self-awareness awareness that these types of movies need. The best part of this movie for me is their choice to use practical effects over CGI using animatronic zombie beavers. It adds a lot more charm to the creatures, even if they still look like puppets. I also think the addition of the human beaver hybrids helps this one elevate from just being a cheesy zombie movie. It adds an entire extra layer of fun. I also feel like this one should have been franchised. We have like 5 Gingerdead Mans and 9 evil Bongs. By now we should have Zombadgers, Zombeetles, Zombarracudas. You get it. This movie has the highest estimated budget on this list, and while I can't find an exact number, it's estimated to have been made for up to $2 million, which I believe just from the cameos alone, which include Bill Burr and John Mayer. This one is another universal recommend from me to horror comedy fans. Like a couple of others so far, it doesn't feel so cheap and over the top that I think it should fall into the niche B-movie categories. It honestly feels like a higher quality to-be original, and funnily enough, that's exactly where you can watch it, along with Pluto TV, the Roku app, and you can stream it with your Amazon Prime subscription. The next one is Deadstream. I'm not a fan of found footage style movies, and with the basic ass, overdone, skeptic stays in a haunted house only to discover that ghosts are real plot, I went into this expecting to turn it off halfway through. But it actually pulled me in and kept me in. This is one of the more polished movies on my list, but don't let that fool you because it's still incredibly chaotic and cheesy in a good way. Deadstream follows Sean Ruddy, a disgraced live streamer whose career takes a hit after one of his online stunts goes way too far. In an attempt to win his audience back, he decides to spend the night live streaming from a supposedly haunted house while completing a series of challenges for his viewers. Soon, his desperate comeback stream turns into a full-blown supernatural nightmare as Sean realizes the house is very much haunted. What makes this movie work so well is Sean himself, who is intentionally obnoxious. He is one of those characters who starts out unbearable but somehow becomes hilarious because the writers understood exactly how to weaponize his desperation, cowardice, and need for attention. The movie is genuinely funny, but with creepy practical effects, strong pacing, and enough actual scares to keep it from feeling like just a parody. Although Thankskilling is my personal favorite movie on this list, this one has to be my #1 recommend for fans of horror comedies, fans of found footage, and fans of fun movies in general. If you watch any movie on this list, let it be this one. And since it is a Shudder original, that's exactly where you could find it. So if you have a Shudder subscription, I would give this one a chance. And my #1 pick is Psycho Goreman. I think this might be the only movie on this list where the name doesn't actually give away what the movie is about. If I gave you 3 guesses at what this movie was about based on name alone, I bet none of those 3 would be that it's a nostalgic homage to 80s and 90s pop culture, campy sci-fi shows like Power Rangers, and kid-centric horror like The Gate. Psycho Goreman follows a young girl named Mimi and her older brother Luke, who accidentally unearth a powerful alien warlord buried on Earth after discovering a magical gem. The monster, who identifies himself as Archduke of Nightmares, is casually renamed to Psycho Goreman by the children. He shares that he is a destroyer of planets and will wipe out Earth, but because Mimi has the gem, he is now forced to obey her commands. From there, the movie spirals into a mix of suburban chaos, alien assassins, family comedy, and extremely over-the-top gore as PG tries to break free and get back to his usual business of slaughter and destruction. This movie fully commits to its own ridiculous premise, but still has really strong effects, creature design, and world building underneath all the jokes. The characters are also a big part of the fun. Mimi is honestly what makes this whole whole thing either work for you or not, because she is so aggressively bossy and over the top that I know some people find her annoying. But I personally think she's hilarious. PG himself is such a great character. He looks and talks like he belongs in Power Rangers, but instead he's stuck in a bad family sitcom. My favorite part of this character is the growth from beginning to end, where in the beginning he is fueled by hate and torture, and by the end he vows to still destroy planets, but now he's going to do it with the power of love. Despite all the lightheartedness, this is actually not a kids movie. There are some body horror scenes that I would say are fairly disturbing. There's also some over-the-top gore, as expected in lower budget movies like this. Fake blood is generally made from a combination of corn syrup, water, and red food coloring. And even a movie on a $300 budget can afford loads of that. The practical effects and creature design and makeup in this one overall are great. Probably the best on this list, although it does get intentionally cheesy to match the retro vibe they're going for. This one I would highly recommend for retro sci-fi fans and anyone that enjoys 80s and 90s nostalgia.